Okay.
Okay, it's not coming on. Hold on.
You guys are live. Go.
President White, you can go ahead and get started.
Good evening, everybody. Today is March 17th. It's approximately 6:05 p.m. and I'm calling to order the meeting of the Board of Education. First of all, I want to thank Marisol, Carl, Kalia, Carlos, and in particular, if y'all don't mind, I'd like to thank Tom and his team. Superintendent Dade, you know what a great team you have in the communications department, particularly those media folks. They always seem to come through in a very difficult set of circumstances. And this was difficult. This was not easy. And I know my colleagues and I really do appreciate the work that those folks that I identified did to make this happen today. I want folks to know that because of the staff's good work, this stuff can be seen, of course, on YouTube and Marisol, where else can it be seen on? Someone's going to help me out here. Where did Marisol go? Well, we'll find
Facebook Live.
Facebook Live. Thank you, Commissioner LeBron. So folks can see this on Facebook Live and YouTube. But again, let me repeat, it was not easy, and we appreciate the good and important work that they're doing to make this happen. I'm convinced, as I'm sure some of my colleagues are, that this kind of virtual interaction will become the new normal. In fact, it has become the new normal for many of our students in the classrooms. In fact, with all of our students from 9 to 12 having Chromebooks, and 60% of Rochester's community, which is not enough, having access to the internet, and another additional amount having access through hotspots. This will, if it's not already, become the new normal in many of our children's and our families' lives. If there was any doubt whether this is the new normal, that is people conducting this kind of business over the World Wide Web, if you had to be convinced, you've now been convinced through COVID-19 and the need for social distancing in situations like this. Indeed, the Board of Education, the Superintendent of Schools have taken this unprecedented step, that is to meet virtually. Everybody you can see is in a different location because our staff and their families are important to us. And the only way we can ensure their safety, because after all, those are the folks that serve our children, is to protect and serve them. In this way, we feel we are doing our small part to protect the people that protect and provide for our students. Now, one other thing before we get started. I will mess up. Let me repeat that. I will mess up. Something will go wrong. That is the human condition. In addition, there probably will be a technical glitch or two along the way. During those moments, all my colleagues and I just ask for your patience. And in the case of my colleagues, I know they will provide some corrective direction to put me back on track. All right, so let's get started. Speakers list. We have no speakers today, so we don't have to deal with that challenge. And in fact, as folks know, the board issued a directive because of the current healthcare crisis to eliminate the speakers or public attendance at our meetings. Next item on the agenda is special updates. And we're going to begin with Carl Christoph and Steve Carling for a federal and state legislative and legal guidelines update. Carl and Steve.
I'm going to be taking this one for the most part, just to avoid the back and forth. Carl will jump in if I really step in anything too deeply. So we try to put together as best we can in a very rapidly changing environment, the update on where the federal and the state laws are coming in as to how to deal with aspects that are unique to schools or to public bodies in general. And so, we're starting with one of the more pressing issues at the moment, which is what's going to happen with our school year. On the first slide, the required minimum attendance for students is 180 days in order to receive full funding. However, the Federal Department of Education has said that it would consider targeted one-year waivers on attendance rules for funding and for accountability, but on a state-by-state basis. The governor issued one executive order a little over a week ago, directing that any school district that decides it wants to close, he would only consider to be a valid closing if the county health department agreed. In that order, he indicated that he would allow a suspension of the 180-day requirements to the extent the schools aren't able to make up missed instructional days, and that would include if there's vacation days left on the table like if we were to come back in session and at the end of the 2-week period, spring break is in there, and we're unclear at the moment as to where that would, if we'd be required to hold classes during spring break or not, for example. Under the pre-existing rules prior to COVID-19, we would. Under the rules issued by the governor on March 7th, it seems like we also would most likely have to make up to those days. But then he issued a new order on March 16th requiring all schools in New York to close for a set 2 weeks. That order did not appear to supersede the March 7th directive, but at the same time, it didn't address pieces of it either. So we are in a bit of a state of unknown at the moment. If the statewide 2-week order isn't extended, for example, we'll have to find out what's going to happen, but we're not alone. Obviously, these questions are applicable to almost every school district in the state. Anyone in Monroe County, for example, will be on the same vacation schedule we are. So a couple of pieces we take away from that. We're going to have to see how long we remain closed. If at the end of the 2-week period, Monroe County Health Department determines we're not prepared to open yet, that takes us longer. We'll have to see, what the impact on that would be, and certainly we'll be seeking guidance from State Ed Department with whom we have a good relationship, and Terry has a good line communication to the commissioner there. So to the extent we need to seek any guidance, we certainly will. Next is another question comes testing. We're just about into testing time. On the next slide. The first, there's 2 federally required testing windows that we're dealing with. As you know, the 3 through 8 ELA and the 3 through 8 math are required under federal law, under the ESSA. What they did was originally extend the testing deadline here in New York to say you have until April 8th, from March 25th to April 8th is the new window to do the ELA, and April 21st to May 5th is the window to do math. What the feds had said was that they'd consider targeted 1-year waivers for these exams as well, based on a state-by-state basis, rather than issuing a blanket waiver. New York State Ed Department's taking a little bit harder line and saying that if, at this moment at least, if school resumes during any part of the testing window, that the district should administer the exams. Certainly as this progresses, if we have more time away from the classroom for the kids, we're going to be hoping for additional consideration, but at this moment, nobody really knows. Next is testing for the regions. So these are obviously New York State requirements unique to New York. The regions exams, there's one scheduled for June 2nd, and then the majority of the testing window is June 17th to 25th. In the event of a significant loss of learning time due to mandatory county closures, NYSED has said that it would allow waiver of their seat time requirements. A student has to have a certain number of minutes of instruction generally to be eligible to sit for the Regents exam. And then also they have to have labs in science-related classes. SCD has indicated they're willing to consider waivers or allow the superintendent to allow students to sit for Regents exams, both in the non-science and the science-based classes, even if they don't meet the minimum requirements in those areas, and that if the student passes the exam, they would be considered to have passed the class. Obviously, as things go, we'll have to see when the closure ends. We don't have an answer. For example, what if this brings us right into the middle of the testing window? We just don't know at this point. But everybody's running as fast as they can and issuing the most immediate orders they can, and we kind of wait for the lag to catch up and say, okay, what next? But we'll certainly keep you apprised if anything significant arises from that. Next is accountability. As you know, when we get rated as far as the accountability is whether schools are in good standing or not in good standing, there's 2 factors that they look at: 95% participation rate for ELA and math assessments and chronic absenteeism. The feds have said that they're going to be flexible around both those items, especially to the extent that we can point to the prolonged closure being reflective of the reason that neither of those matrix would be met, which is that's the best we have so far. Flexibility. We don't know what that means exactly. if they're going to do some kind of a graded waiver, or maybe, if they end up if they give us a waiver on the ELA, for example, whoever sits for it wouldn't matter, but the absenteeism piece would certainly be something we need to figure out if they're doing a weighted measure, or just a straight waiver for the year, but we just don't know yet. Next is feeding families. In the recommendation to close the schools, the governor and the Commissioner of Education have been pretty clear that they expect the schools to find ways to feed the students and the families. What the federal government did was provide that meals served during these times would be eligible for reimbursement through the federal school lunch program, which makes them almost completely aidable. New York also, I said DOE, but New York SED was granted a waiver for meals to be served in a grab-and-go format, because normally they need to be consumed on premises unless there's some kind of a waiver. And in this case, we were able to obtain that. Terry and his team will update you on how that is progressing, but it's not going to be a significant financial burden on us as a result, which is a positive. And finally, the last item that affects all of you are briefed on it. That's why we're in this format, but the governor's executive order specifically suspended the requirement for in-person public, for allowing public into open meetings. And I've put the text of the executive order on there. So during the period of time that they deem this crisis to be in effect, then we do not have to allow public access to meetings as normally would be required. And so we are currently in compliance with that order by this format, as long as what we do is make it available, that they're recorded and that they're available to be reviewed remotely, which we're doing, as you indicated when we started out, President White. So that concludes my brief presentation. Obviously, there's a lot more. It's dynamic. From the time I drafted this on Monday morning to the time I sent it over to Carl to take a look at on Monday afternoon, one of the laws had already changed when the governor issued the 2-week mandatory closure. So we expect we're watching this thing constantly, and we're trying to be as reactive as we can within the confines of what we're given. So that's where we are. If there's any questions about the content, I'm happy to talk through it. If there's anything that would constitute legal advice, I may suggest that we would maybe wait and talk about it offline, but we can try and offer any guidance I can at this moment.
Just so that we don't step all over each other, I saw Commissioner Shepard raising her hand. I have it on the gallery view. So I'll just do what we would normally do if we were together. If a person, catches my eye or raises their hand, I'll just call on them. So Commissioner Shepard, I saw that she had raised her hand.
Yeah, Steve, I wanted to ask, I thought that the 95 participation rate as being one of the provisions on where a district stands, I thought that was removed.
I'm quoting from the guidance. It's actually in the guidance they just issued. So as to whether or not they are enforcing it is different than if it's still on the books. It appears to still be on the books, and that it's one of the two things that they specifically say they'd waive. But if Carl has further information on that, we didn't talk about that piece specifically. I was just noting that that's what the law says, and the Fed just issued that guidance a couple days ago.
Commissioner LeBron?
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Carl, did you want to add anything?
No, that's consistent with my understanding as well. It's still on the books, and they have said that they would consider waiving it in these circumstances.
Is there? Oh,
I'm sorry. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah. Is there a way that we can confirm? Because I thought that it was under Commissioner Ilya. I wasn't sure if it was put forth like as a recommendation and had already been through, but I just wanted to confirm because I know that that was something that I had heard. But that's just I know we're talking specific to this case, but I do want to know generally for overall, because I did hear that is where we were supposed to be moving in New York State.
Superintendent Dade, were you trying to say something? Did I hear you trying to say something?
We can go back and confirm, but our understanding that is absolutely still in place for federal guidelines and regulations. But we can confirm for Commissioner Shepard just to make sure that New York wasn't going a different route.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, so today in the governor's briefing, he mentioned that he was only going to give out executive orders for 2 weeks at a time, but that we really should be expecting a 45-day in terms of everything that's happening to flatten the curve. Have you guys heard, did you guys hear that in in his briefing today? And are we planning ahead for that?
Right now, we're operating under the April 1st guidance that we would expect. We've asked for a few days headway just to make sure that we're not scrambling, to make sure that everything's ready. But really give us a few days if he's going to extend past the 2 weeks. But at this point, we're operating under the April 1st extension.
Yeah, I can say from a legal perspective, at least, Commissioner LeBron, that the only thing that we have in our hands is a 2-week executive order. With as dynamic as this thing is, there's no other way to really react into what we have. We listen to what they say, but sometimes that changes too. We all left school on Friday thinking we were okay, and come Saturday afternoon we were closed. So we're just flying as fast as we can, and building the plane while we're in the air, as we continue to do here sometimes. So, but as far as an extension of the order, whatever time they give us to react, we'll do so. And certainly, prior to 2-week order, I know we had been prepared for as long as we could foresee, and we're just trying to have everything in place to do that. That's really having worked, spending lots of hours with Terry and Linda and Anne Marie. We're in full-time prep mode. We've had a day off in a while, let's just say. So, but as far as the second piece, I think that anything he's going to do to extend, we would certainly probably have more than a day or two to prepare for it, and we'd be ready. I would say from what we have so far, at least. So.
Any other questions? All right, this is actually easier to see you all than the normal sitting at the long table. So we got to do this more often. All right, next item on the agenda is district operations. Deputy Superintendent Quick.
So I'm going to lead us off, and Ms. Quick's going to chime in as needed. So first, I just want to make sure that I give a shout out to the team here. Like Steve said, I mean, literally we left Friday under one piece of information and woke up to news that we were going to district-wide closure. So the team worked all over the weekend to get us ready. We had been preparing for the closure, which is why I think it went so smoothly these first 2 days, but nevertheless, it took a great team effort. So shout out to the team and those workers that you see on the front line handing out food, our custodians who are actually in charge of the disinfecting and cleaning, our security staff who have been on hand with extra hands, teachers, principals. I mean, this is just has really warmed my heart to see everyone coming together. So with regards to priorities, we came out very early to send some priorities to the community at large. That our first priority was the safety and security of our students and staff, and to make sure that they were fed. So that's why you saw a detailed plan come out in collaboration with the City of Rochester, detailing our meals plan that we'll get into later. Concurrently, we are in the process of disinfecting buildings, and you'll hear more about the educational resources that we'll provide for our students and families later in this presentation. But first and foremost, we were concerned about the safety and security of our students and staff, along with making sure that we had a well-executed meals plan. The meal distribution, we have prepared and are delivering pack and go breakfast and lunch to 7 school sites and 9 R Center sites throughout the city. They are open Monday through Friday. The school sites are from 8:00 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and the R Center sites are open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So again, that's breakfast and lunch being provided by RCSD at all sites, and a great collaboration with FoodLink to provide dinners at all sites throughout this closure. The distribution sites are listed on our website and all over the city. I hear it on the radio. We've done a really good job in collaboration with the county and the city to make sure that those sites are publicized. Moving on to, there were some questions around staff reporting. Again, this has been a fluid conversation with restrictions changing each and every day. So Governor Cuomo signed an executive order yesterday directing all schools to close until Wednesday, April 1st. He also requested that we reduce on-site workforce, not only us, but everyone in the county and the city, by at least 50%. So we have responded accordingly. Central office staff are reporting to work during the closure as needed based on supervisor discretion. But we do have non-essential central office staff personnel working from home. As you know, they're manning the hotlines from home. We rerouted the hotline number to a variety of phones so that all the questions are being answered. We're bringing in folks in staggered groups to make sure that we're meeting this directive as well, and a whole lot of email, phone, and Zoom meetings like we're doing this evening. Principals and APs came in yesterday. They came in today as well. We had our buildings open from 8:00 a.m. to 12 p.m. for students, staff, anyone who needed to access to gather materials and backpacks, things missing that they forgot in their locker. Teachers and teams turned that into getting things ready for students as much as they could. Great stories on Twitter and Facebook of teachers delivering resources to students' homes and the like. So again, amazing collaboration right now. And we're directing all staff members who have questions about whether they need to come in or not to contact us directly, their principal, their school chief, the direct supervisor, and we respond accordingly. Food service staff are reporting every day for meal preparation. As I said, custodians are reporting for building cleaning. Once schools have been cleaned and disinfected, buildings will be locked and badge access will be restricted. We're going to take this very seriously. We have to give every assurance to you, the Board of Education, our community at large, to say we can guarantee that each of these buildings were adequately cleaned and disinfected. So once we close it down, we need to keep it closed down until we get the word from Governor Cuomo that we're going to be back in operation. We want to be ready the very next day to have that happen. So that's a little bit on staff reporting. All buildings will be cleaned and disinfected by the end of this week. Mike and his team have done an amazing job getting started already. The meal distribution areas are cleaned at the end of each day. Meal distribution is limited to one common space in each building. So again, we're limiting access. That way we can assure that the rest of the building was cleaned and disinfected. And then we'll just have that final sweep at the end of each day at the meal distribution sites to make sure that those areas are cleaned and disinfected each and every day. On to educational resources. We are committed to providing age and grade level appropriate educational resources, not only on the district website for our students and families to access, but we're also thinking of brick and mortar type educational resources by way of packets, worksheets that we can gather and run off and have delivered to food sites so that if a second grader comes and picks up a lunch, they can also pick up a second grade math packet at the same time. So we're working on that plan right now. Teachers have already started getting in contact with their students and families. Most of you know, if you know of a student in the district right now, if you have kids of your own, through a variety of formats. Teachers have direct access to our students and families, so they've already started reaching out to say, hey, how are you doing? Just checking in, we still love you. And by the way, have you checked out this website for a read aloud by Mo Willems or something of that nature. So we're gonna release much more information by way of our educational resource plan tomorrow for everyone to access tomorrow for our students and staff and community. Here's an example of what you can see. So when our students access their individualized home pages, these are some of the learning resources that you'll see made available to them. Mayan, there in the middle, is online reading. Brain Pop is a series of educational videos for science content, history content, and the like. So this could look very different depending on if it's an elementary age student all the way up to high school. On the RCSD Learns website that we pumped out to the community on Sunday or Monday, every day is running together for me. This is an example of the screen that will pop up. So there are grade level specific resources that our students and parents can go on and access that will have grade level specific content to download, to peruse, and the like. So we're really excited about the online educational resources made available. I also want to make sure that everyone's crystal clear that we know that everyone does not have access to online capability, which is why I said we're working hard to work with our teachers and with our T&L folks and with our technology department to also have packets available for students where they can go to food distribution centers and also pick up grade level content by way of paper and pencil packets throughout their closure as well. Finally, the RCSD support hotline. You see the number on your screen, 262-8700. It is staffed by someone from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. There are currently 5 staff members supporting that hotline. Students, parents, guardians, community members are encouraged to call this number for the most up-to-date information, how to access additional resources. If a staff member cannot answer their question, the caller's information is put into a database and we follow up with them directly. In just the first 24 hours, 166 calls were logged just yesterday. So the number is out there, folks are all over it, and our staff is ready to respond accordingly. And if they don't have the answer, they'll find it out. So additional resources are on our website. We have a special COVID-19 link, and then we're really promoting that 262-8700 hotline number to make sure that our community knows how they can access us during this uncharted territory that we're experiencing at this time. All right. Any questions?
I see Commissioner LeBron, and then I see Vice President Elliott. Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, I wrote down some of the questions. So first and foremost, I know I talked to you, Terry. There you are. I'm trying to look at your box so if you could see me, about the meal distribution. And if you can give an update about, I know a lot of members in the community have been asking about us potentially using our school buses, but I also know that we don't own a lot of school buses. We have a limited amount, and what the conversation is around that. And then I have 2 other questions. So do you want me to wait till you answer that one or just ask all of them?
I can take them one at a time. So there's a
Okay.
lot of different ways that districts are responding to meal distribution. And 100% of districts are following the health department guidance. So at this time, the most economical and efficient manner that is also in accordance with the Monroe County Health Department is to have food distribution sites that our community can access throughout the city. We strategize where those were occurring by way of location. We really wanted it to be not on a bus route, but within walking distance of our students' homes. So that's how they were placed. We have a call with the city tomorrow to just see how things are going, if there's any areas that we need to focus in on. So Commissioner LeBron and I had a conversation about a potential area that needs a site. So we're going to speak with our city counterparts to see if they're hearing the same information, with a plan to, if needed, shift gears and have different site made available as of next Monday. So right now, we are not under the guidance of the health department to restrict walkability and commutability in the city and in the county, which is why we're not resorting to a house-to-house or type of delivery at this time. Did that answer the question, Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah. And then this question really is for the board log. So I don't think there's going to be any answers right now, but I would like at the end of all of this for us as a board to have an understanding what impact this is going to have on the budget overall. So I don't think, again, that there's going to be an answer anytime soon, but I do want this recorded on the budget, on the board question log, is the impact that this is going to have on the budget moving forward. And then also with the staff reporting, I don't know, this is an executive session item because I'm not speaking about any particular staff or group of staffing, but I am interested in knowing if we are going to be paying our staff. And I did see El Paso School Board actually had a presentation from their administration because they've also closed, and they were able to give a presentation on all of the collective bargaining units that would be paid and who wouldn't be, and what we were doing to support, but what they were doing potentially to support anybody who wasn't going to be paid, because they were looking to ensure that the staff was taken care of. So I don't know if that's an executive session conversation, if we could do something similar to have an understanding. But I do have concerns about all of our collective bargaining units and how they're going to be able to support their families during this time.
Steve or Carl?
Just as a general proposition, and we can certainly talk about it more in executive session should legal advice be needed concerning the application of the contract. But as a general matter, most all of our employees are going to be in a paid status. There are very few exceptions. And we're even looking at those as hard as we can to ensure that to the extent it's legally permissible, that our employees continue to be paid because among other things, they're all pretty much on call to service the needs of the district, especially in as much as we're in a very fluid situation right now.
Vice President Elliott?
Yeah, my question related to what Commissioner LeBron has just presented. My question is particularly with the maintenance staff, how are we, is there extra compensation for them? Is there some incentive? And how are they being protected if they're the ones who are doing the cleaning? How are we protecting them and them coming in versus other staff who are not coming in? Is there some special compensation for them? Let me just say, you know, they have families too. And that's one of the concerns here at Bain Street that some of our maintenance staff has had, you know, having to continue to remain open, but there's some fear. And, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, our maintenance staff in many regards are some of the lowest paid. They're disproportionately African-American. And so, you know, my concern is there some kind of additional compensation or incentive? And secondarily, and probably this should be primarily, how are they being protected as they are cleaning our facilities?
So with regards to the protection, we take that extremely seriously. So we're relying on the experts from across the county and the city to make sure that we are providing appropriate protective gear for our custodial staff, because their safety is absolutely our priority. With regards to compensation, currently there is not additional compensation. That is something that we need to discuss further. But as we look to support the wages of all of our employees at this time, the money is going to be something that we're going to have to discuss further. So we're really trying to make sure that everyone's coming in on rotational basis. After this week, we foresee a reduction in the number of staff that we need on site. So everyone knows that our top priority is making sure that every single building is disinfected and cleaned by the end of this week. After this week, we see that number of staff members going down dramatically because we plan to have those buildings inaccessible for the remainder of the closure. So we're weighing all those factors, but right now there's not additional compensation, because you would also have to say that for a lot of employee groups who are coming in at this time. But again, open for discussion, but that's where we are right now.
So what's the cleaning strategy when our students return? How are we taking care of buildings once they come back into the schools?
We've always had a cleaning process in place. Dr. Mendoza talks about it the same way as we really need to make sure that we're doing the same thing that we would be doing for the fear of spread of flu and the like, making sure that areas are disinfected, that folks are practicing good etiquette by way of hand washing, hand sanitation, and the like, but also making sure that our buildings are disinfected as they typically are on a normal basis.
Well, that's why I think I take some exception, because it's not normal. And so is there going to be additional cleaning? I understand that this virus is 10 times worse than the flu. So is there some additional cleanings? Well, maybe you haven't worked on that, because I'm hearing you say normal, but this is not a normal scenario. And so I would think that the cleaning would not be a normal scenario either. So I would suggest that we look at being that this is not a normal situation where you're talking about just the regular flu, but that from what I've read is 10 times worse, that we may need to look at increasing the amount of time that we clean. So for example, if we're cleaning a building or classroom, once a week or so, we may have to look at cleaning that a little more often because of this, the seriousness of this virus.
Yeah, and I agree. This is not normal. I was talking about when we return. I believe that we would be given the indication that we're back to normal. So that's what I was talking about by way of cleaning. That once the buildings have been disinfected, once we flatten the curve and get a handle on COVID-19, that we would be back to close to normal operations. But all that said, I'm committed to following the experts and letting Dr. Mendoza and his team let us know what the cleaning and disinfecting practices should be. Should we be changing our practices by way of employee groups, student groups, and the like? So you have our utmost commitment that we're going to follow the experts and what they say by way of cleaning schedules and the like.
Any other questions for the superintendent? Commissioner Shepard? Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, so so I'm not sure if this can be answered right now. I want to know who is staffing the art centers and the art schools, like specifically their titles, and how much that is costing us, and if we are paying for the food that is being supplied by FoodLink. are those questions that can be answered right now?
We're not paying for the food link food.
Okay. So then the other questions, I guess, can go on the question log. And then my last concern, so I absolutely do believe, I think everybody in this community knows by now that I believe that it was the right thing to do to close the schools immediately on starting Friday. I know it ended up coming down on Saturday as the final decision. But I do have a major concern about the educational resources of our students. I know you had mentioned brick and mortar, and this is something that I did take into account as just something that we have to carry two buckets at the same time. And so my question or my concern, I guess I'll pose it as my concern first, is when students do return, there are teachers, administrators, providing educational resources right now, but it's kind of all over the place. And so when students do return, I do want to know what will be the educational plan to pick right back up from where our students were at when they left. And if you believe that there's going to be extra financial supports that are going to be needed at the point of return to get everybody back on the same page moving forward. That's a little bit different than us getting an extension or us changing the school year. I know that you guys are working on that too, but I also want to keep in the forefront kind of some of that lost time that is happening during their during this time frame. And so I would like to know what would that educational plan look like in regards to what we would need to do to provide some supports financially to get everybody back up on the same page, since it's kind of all over the place right now.
Absolutely, and that will have to be determined. As you know, if we come back on April 1st, my answer is going to be very different than if we came back on May 1st. So definitely as we get closer to knowing when we return, we'll be able to provide you with that information.
Any other questions for the superintendent? Okay, we can next move on to our next item on the agenda. Which
Sorry, President White.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I did have one more request. If we are moving forward with the educational resources being in brick and mortar, and I know you said just looking at providing those at the actual feeding sites, will you be doing an announcement at that point so people know to come and pick stuff up? If not, I would like to make that request.
Yes, absolutely. That's going to be in our announcement tomorrow as we communicate out to students and families.
All right, if there being no further questions, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. But before we do that, let me just say what I should have said at the outset of this meeting. If something should happen to my computer, and thus one of the glitches that could occur, we're going to follow our normal protocol. So if I disappear from the screen, Vice President Elliott would take over the management of the meeting. And then if for some reason her screen should fall out, God forbid, I think our bylaws require that the board select the chair of the meeting. So you'll have 5 board members left at that particular point. You'll still have a quorum. You'll pick somebody to chair the meeting. I just wanted to say that because I had noticed on my screen, it was saying, I've never seen this before, your signal is not strong on occasion. So if I drop out, we'll just do what we always do. All right, next item on the agenda.
Van,
yes.
when I was by here, I know it's very early in this process. We've only had 2 days of meals being served, but do we have any data on how many families are picking up meals?
Good question.
We do. We're still sorting through that. We're trying to also get with our city counterparts. That's why we have a call tomorrow. So we'd like to provide you with an update at the end of the week. It's going to be more accurate than trying to say what day 1 looked like when we gave families just less than 24 hours notice, versus what we deem to be much more normal by the end of the week. So if you all permit us to provide you with an end of week update, that would be great.
Sounds good. Marisol, you want to take the gavel?
I sure will. Thank you very much. So we are moving into our new normal, and while we thought that this particular exercise would take place later in the week, it's happening today. So thank you all very much for your patience in getting some of the glitches out. I do want to thank Tom, Mohan, Mahima, and their team. They've done stellar work all day today trying to get this set up. So in terms of board operations during this time, all board meetings, special meetings, committee meetings, and business meetings will be hosted via the Zoom video conferencing site. We are developing a list of issues that happened today so that we can address them. So if there are any suggestions that you have, we would appreciate them. Please email them to me. All the meeting materials will be developed and distributed via email and placed on board docs. To that end, we have an audit committee meeting next week and a business meeting next Thursday as well. So we're going to ensure that you receive all of your materials in a timely manner so that you can review them. But all meetings will take place during the Zoom session. For public speakers at our meetings, I know that's been a question that's come up in one of the chats, and speakers are going to be allowed to submit their public comment via board.of.education@rcsdk12.org. And they can submit the information. They have to provide their name, their affiliation, whether they're a student, a parent, a community member, or a staff person, and then provide the topic for which they are writing about. That will be read into the public record, and there will be no anonymous comments accepted or read into the public record. So if anyone has any questions, we will be posting this information on the web page as well. In terms of board staff and reporting, staff will follow the guidelines as provided by the superintendent following the governor's orders. And as I indicated already, we will be preparing all of the materials necessary for ongoing meetings. Does anybody have any questions on that?
You all set, Marisol?
I'm all set.
Well, this should go without saying, but when we picked you to serve as district clerk, I think I'll just speak for myself. I don't know if we truly knew what we were getting in terms of your organizational ability and your ability to do things on the fly. She alluded to the fact that they were going to do this next week, but I had this idea that we should be doing it now, given the urgency of the situation. And the whole team, from the superintendent to legal staff, to Marisol and her team, Kaya, Tom, just did an amazing job. And they did this like on the flip of a dime. So and all the presentations are well thought out, very thorough. None of us board members did any of that. And again, although it was tense at times, Marisol, as you attempted to execute this almost impossible task in such a short period of time, you did a great job. And I think, if we can applaud, I think, we are really blessed to have you. And I don't want you to think, even in all the tense moments and difficult times, that there's not a person on these screens that doesn't appreciate that. So, all right, next item on the agenda is Finance Committee. So I turn the gavel over to Commissioner LeBron.
Yes, thank you. So we are limiting, obviously we changed our budget meeting date. Hopefully everybody had a chance to talk with different folks. I know that Van, we kind of split the group up to have conversations with different board members as to why we were changing and releasing the budget next week. So the budget will be released next week. And then I guess we will have to figure out how we're going to get budget books to everybody. And Marisol and Kali, I will look to you guys on how that's going to be either delivered or ready for pickup at the board office. So on the agenda is the review and discuss the finance reports and then the budget calendar updates. Because we did change the budget release date, we looked at all of the dates today and had this conversation, and we'll go over those dates when we get there. But for right now, are you going to put up on the screen, Marisol, the finance reports, the 2020 for, thank you. So if you look at the screen, I'm going to give Bob and his team some kudos. I know that there were requests to change the format of this to make it a little bit easier to read. I think when we're talking about finances and numbers and accounting especially, I don't think it's easy to read anyway and digest, but they have made an attempt to make it easier for the board to follow. And I'll let Bob and his team member talk about that. Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, I hope I'm going to hit the highlights as they appear in the cover memo. If you do have specific questions in the reports, please jump in with those, or you can submit them on the board log, your preference. Just going through our first report, as usual, is our cash balance and general ledger summary. Again, the report shows each bank account's beginning, ending balances, and a summary of their activities. I'm going to highlight for you our general fund and all funds. Just looking at the end of the prior month, January 31st, our beginning cash balance within the general fund, just over $53.7 million. The district did take in a number of cash receipts and transfers into the accounts, just over $80.2 million. Of course, we are paying bills every week, so we have cash disbursements in excess of $91.7 million, leaving an ending balance at the end of February of just over $42.2 million in the general fund, just over $45.1 million for all funds. We commented at the last meeting, is $40 million a large number or a small number? I'll comment that in a perfect world, the district would have about 2 months worth of operating expenses in cash. So for this district, our 2 months worth of general fund expenses would amount to be roughly $130 million. If you look at all funds, 2 months worth of expenses would be about $155 million. So we are quite shy of 2 months worth of expenses.
Bob?
Yes?
Willa Powell. I'm looking at your summary report, and I'm seeing all funds, receipts and transfers in is lower than general fund transfers and receipts. And I'm trying to comprehend how that could be, all funds being general funds plus. Is there an anomaly there to explain?
Commissioner, are you referring to the column transfers among bank accounts?
I'm looking at the report that's on the screen now.
Oh, yes. Very good.
Second row.
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. The reason would be because of, if you look at the detail report, page 1 of 20, you will see a column reflecting our transfers among bank accounts, where the accounts within our general fund had transfers in, net transfers in, just over $1.1 million. You're not going to see that corresponding amount in all funds. All funds really transfers in and out should net to zero. So I'm highlighting for you on the cover memo just the net transfers pertaining to the general fund and then all funds. So while the general fund had about almost $1.14 million in net transfers in, when I look at all funds, the net transfers is zero, which it should be. That does explain why you see a funny number on this cover memo.
Thank you.
Looking at our cash flow projection.
Just to connect with Commissioner Powell, then I would think that that number would roll over to be the same as what's in the general fund. Why is that not the case?
Actually, Commissioner, we do have a number of other funds, our trust and agency funds, our lunch fund, and our capital fund. So not all transfers into the general fund come from within the general. So you will see, in particular, transfers from our capital project accounts.
So are you saying that some of the accounts, some of the funds have a negative balance?
Yes, Commissioner. Yes, they do. Some of the funds would have a net negative, while some of the funds have a net positive. When you add them together, the balance is zero.
All right, thank you.
Certainly.
Bob, if I could just interrupt colleagues when, just for the mechanics of this, when they put up screens, images, I lose the gallery view. So you're just going to have to do as Commissioner Powell and Vice President Elliott did, just interrupt graciously. Nobody else is speaking because I cannot see everybody. I only see 4 images right now. So I just wanted to let you know that. Thanks. Good.
And
Go
I
ahead.
agree with that because I can't see everybody either.
Right. People, we're all just sort of learning this on the fly, but once again, when these images appear, it really restricts the number of people that you can see. I'm sorry, Bob. I just wanted to note that. So people.
Absolutely. No problem at all.
Could I also say about that I appreciate the changes to your summary report. I think that they reflect some of the suggestions that Van has been trying to make. Were these particularly difficult for you to pull together into the summary report? It looks quite different.
Actually, no, I just transcribed the numbers from the detail reports to the cover memo. It's not a problem, not a problem at all.
I was going to save that towards the end, but you're absolutely right, Commissioner Powell. Bob, I do appreciate the changes, particularly in the during the month of February narrative. It does, for me, it flows a little bit easier. So thank you very much for that consideration. I appreciate it.
Commissioner, if it's easier to read, it's easier for me to speak to, so it's going to benefit me as well. Looking at page 2, our cash flow projection report. Again, this shows for the general fund, trust and agency, and our lunch fund combined, a summary of the actual monthly cash flows. We do try and separate the actual months from the projected months. I got a big old dotted line on the detail report. And we also compare it to the previous year. In summary, as of the end of February, the district does project to end the current school year with an available cash balance of just over $47 million. That is an improvement from the prior month's projection. If you recall, this month is roughly $4.5 million higher than the projection we showed you last month. So that does suggest to us that the mid-year reductions and the process changes we put in place are having a positive impact on the district's cash. I will throw out a caveat. While it is an improvement, we do anticipate that the district will nonetheless need to issue another revenue anticipation note next year for our cash flow purposes. Just as a reminder, the district borrowed about $50 million this year in Iran. And while I'd like to see that number go down, because our bankers and our credit rating agencies like to see declining borrowings, it really is too early at this point to make that call. So we're going to be keeping our eye on that. We are developing next year's cash flow projection. It is early, but we have to take a stab at that so we can do proper planning for cash flow borrowing. But again, just too early to make the call on whether we can actually lower the amount we're going to be borrowing.
Bob?
Yes.
So what goes into that decision when we talk about having a cash flow issue? Is there anything so I guess you are doing stuff, but what are you looking at to do in order to decrease the amount? So is it the timing of when money comes in? Is it about, or is it more so about what we're spending on and cutting back on?
So Commissioner, that's actually both. And thank you for asking. For the most part, it's all about timing of when we anticipate revenues to come in and when we have to pay our staff and pay our vendors. So that is probably the most important aspect that goes into that decision making. To your other point, what are we paying? I will comment again that the mid-year reductions put in place last December and January, plus some internal process changes that we put in place to manage how we do business, are are actually reducing some of the expenditures we're seeing. So we are seeing reduced expenditures for payroll. We are seeing reduced expenses for health-related benefits, and we are seeing reduced expenses on an ongoing basis for our sub usage. So both of those play a significant factor in how much we need to borrow and the timing of that borrowing.
Okay, and would it be possible, and I wouldn't be expecting an answer right now because I can also come in for a meeting, but I do want to discuss the payment schedules and what it is that we as a board can advocate for, depending on where the revenue is coming from in regards to our payment.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, we can go through that. That's not a problem. I think it's no surprise that the bulk of our revenues come from New York State.
Yeah.
To the extent they do well, we do well. To the extent they have issues, we have issues.
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you.
Certainly. On pages 3 and 4 of the report set.
Bob,
yes.
I'm sorry. I just want to talk about the RAN a little bit and let the board know that city councils would also have to approve the RAN. And Malik Evans, as the chair of finance, has reached out to us to have a meeting with their finance team, which is also open to all city council members. And we're going to be working on setting that up for the board as a whole and their finance committee, as well as anyone else from city council. So we're working out the logistics of that. They would have to approve that. And we should have that conversation now with them because we're going to need their support for that. So I just want to throw that out there and on record.
Excellent point, Commissioner. So on pages 3 and 4 of the packet are revenue summaries. And once again, they show by fund and by revenue source our adopted budget and amended budget, and a column for a projection of what our actual revenues may be by the end of the year, and then the amount of revenues we've received as of the end of February. At this time, I guess I will note that our projected revenues are slightly lower than the currently adopted budget. In particular, our general fund, as currently amended, has revenues of $781.96 million, but we were projecting actual revenues within the general fund to be a little less, about $1.8 million less. I would like to point out, though, that revenue shortfall was anticipated. It is part of the district's $35 million request for additional funding from New York State. I would also point out that we, as a management team, have already taken actions to identify the expenditure appropriations that could be reduced, commensurate with the lower anticipated revenues. And I guess I will remind the committee that when we brought our budget amendment to you back on February 20th, we did point out that another budget amendment would be coming in that April or May timeframe. So you will see another budget amendment shortly. If there are no questions, I'll go on to section D, pages 5 through 11, which are appropriations by major account. As I mentioned last time, this particular set of reports shows what we actually spend our money on. And we provide for reports separately for the general fund, special aid fund, and our lunch fund. In summary, the remaining appropriation balances are outlined on my cover memo. And similar to the cash, we go through what the budgeted appropriations as currently amended are the general fund, special aid, and lunch fund. Back off the encumbrances that are on our books right now. Back off the year-to-date expenditures, and that comes down to a calculation of the available appropriations to be spent by the end of the current school year. So For the general fund, which I'll highlight, we have budget appropriations of just over $781.9 million, just over $69 million of encumbrances, and just over $458.2 million of year-to-date expenditures, leaving the general fund an available appropriation of just over $254.5 million.
Bob, can we go back up to the salary line? I have a question around the employee benefits and salaries.
Okay.
I noticed that the health and dental benefits increased than what was originally budgeted. But it appears that some of the compensation lines have been reduced as of February 29th. So can you discuss what has happened here? If we've got these compensation lines, in many respects, them going down from the original budget, but that the healthcare benefits are going up. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah, that's a good observation, Commissioner. Thank you. You are correct. Compensation lines, budget lines are coming down from the originally adopted budget, and now reflect basically our mid-year reductions that took place back in December and January. In addition to, as you painfully probably remember, in addition to some actual staff layoffs that took place, we also actually limited a number of vacant positions and the funding that was behind them. So that is primarily why you are seeing the amended budget for compensation coming down. With respect to health and dental benefits, trending upwards, actually a couple of things are going on there, commissioners. First and foremost, the district has actually had a couple bad years of high claimants. And I guess I would describe it, we don't have a long history with self-insurance. We started in 2013, and I would suggest to you that 6 years later, we now have only just begun developing a nice trend for our health and dental benefits. But I can point out that the last fiscal year and the current fiscal year, we've seen quite a number of high cost claimants. These would be individuals with a significant medical diagnosis requiring significant medical care and prescription care. Hey, quick to point out though, we do have stop loss insurance. That kicks in at $500,000 per diagnosis. So while our gross expenditures on medical benefits is increasing, we do see reimbursement from our stop loss insurance increasing on a corresponding basis.
I would say that it seems to me that this is an area, this health and dental benefits, that we can look at renegotiating with our bargaining units, because we can't continue to provide these kinds of generous benefits in the long run. So I'm looking to have some conversations around, as we negotiate with our bargaining units, that we're going to have to look at how do we reduce these costs. And then I'm also looking at the charter school tuition that has looked like it went up, from the original budget. It did to what's being appropriated as of February 29, 2020. And so it just seems to me, and I guess I'm just going to get on my soapbox here for a minute, that if we're providing quality education, we can keep a lot of that 89 million within the district. And I'm hoping that people are catching on, that for us to reduce that particular line, that we're going to have to provide quality programming. I mean, our parents, and we tend to think that our parents don't know what they're doing, but they show us every day by taking their kids and walking with their feet to charter schools, because they don't believe that we're providing quality education. if we provided a quality education, we can save $89 million. So I just wanted to get on my soapbox for a minute to say, we're going to have to look at how to best educate our kids, give them the kind of programming that they need and that our parents want for their children, so that we're not spending $90 million on charter school tuition. And I'm done.
Okay. Bob, I do want to ask about the administrative salary piece though. Under compensation, that's actually the only line that went up. And I guess for me, I would like some clarification as to how all the other collective bargaining units went down except for the administrator side of that, why there's an increase there.
Thank you, Commissioner. We can detail that for you.
Okay, thank
You would
you.
allow me to follow up.
Yeah, it
in
could go
writing
on
then.
the board question log.
Bob,
Yes?
on page 6 of 20, the facility, under facilities, the rental is
Yes,
exceed
Commissioner.
the budget appropriation from as amended in February. Can you talk to, and hopefully we'll be able to remember this from month to month and you won't have to ask this question again, but what caused that, and how are we going to cover that?
Thank you, Commissioner. And you can ask this question as often as you need to ask this. Don't worry about remembering from month to month. Rental line, you are probably asking about the negative available appropriation. It's roughly $789,000. Our largest rental is over on Hart Street. And one of the primary occupants of that particular building is our adult education, our OASIS program. We generally, that program is largely funded through the special aid fund. We generally will charge back the OASIS program towards the end of the year for their share of the rent, and we will recoup what appears to otherwise be an overspending on this budget line.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, Commissioner. Shall I go on?
So Bob, I just want to be clear. So whatever is in that available budget line is recouped from OASIS.
Yes, Commissioner. And, I guess it's just our practice to post that chargeback journal entry at the end of the year. Realistically, we could do this on a quarterly basis or even a monthly basis.
Would there be any strain to them to do it differently where we aren't seeing this large of amount negative at the end of the year? How would that impact them? Do you know that?
Commissioner, it's actually an administrative task to do that chargeback on a quarterly or monthly basis. The program generally is reimbursed from the state on a quarterly basis. It might be semi-annually. Forgive me for not having that detail. But from their operating day-to-day practices, they wouldn't feel the quarterly chargeback versus an annual chargeback.
Okay.
Commissioners, the next report is almost the same thing, but instead of the appropriations by major account, which I say shows what we spend our money on, the appropriations by function report shows what we spend our money for. It's a different way of looking at our expenses. It's the way New York State has us report our expenses in our transparency report. I'm a numbers guy, but I still like this presentation just as well. It's very functional, which is why I say it shows what we spend our money for. So I think it's probably a little more user-friendly to a parent or community member to see how we spend our money. But the dollars are primarily the same, and they certainly are the same on the bottom line. So unless there's questions, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this particular set of pages. The last set of reports are capital budget status reports. Those can be found on pages 16 through 20 of the big packet. Again, both these reports, one of them is labeled H Fund, that's our cash capital projects. The other is labeled K Fund, those are our bonded capital projects. And I think you all know capital projects, unlike operating budgets, the appropriations do not expire at the end of the year. They simply carry forward until the project is completed. So these reports show the, for each project, its authorization, its encumbrances and expenses to date, and the remaining project balance that can be spent. In summary, our cash capital funded projects have an initial project budget of just over $72.7 million. When you back off their encumbrances and year-to-date expenditures, our cash capital projects have a remaining balance of just over $11.5 million. For our bonded capital projects, the authorization was initially just over $99.1 million. And when you back off the encumbrances and the project to date expenditures, they have a remaining project balance of just over $12.2 million. And commissioners, unless there are other questions, that would conclude the report.
I do have a question.
Certainly.
I'm trying to leave this screen. But it's in regards to the outstanding checks. I wanted to know, last time I did ask, what is the time frame of the checks expiring? And I would like to know what is the longest date or the oldest date of whatever check that we have out right now.
Commissioner, I believe our checks stale date after 6 months, but I'm going to confirm that for you. And if I didn't confirm it last month, I apologize.
Okay.
I think I did comment our stale dated checks, if they are not claimed and if the district is not requested to issue a new check, we do have an obligation to reach out to the payee and try and locate them. Otherwise, after a 3-year period, we have to escheat these funds to the state comptroller.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah, so if I could get the actual time frame or the actual length.
Yes, Commissioner, thank you.
Willa Powell here. Motion to approve these reports.
Actually, I was going to do a motion to move them to the business meeting to just allow the board to have more time to review them and approve them at the next board business meeting.
That makes sense. Is there a motion?
I'll motion it.
Well, the chair can't
Well,
motion.
she did a motion, so do we have to vote on that motion?
No.
My motion is basically what you're suggesting, Commissioner LeBron, well, my motion is that as a committee, we move it to the full board for approval.
Is there a second? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner LeBron. I'm sorry.
No, I just want, I'll second it if it's approval at the next board business meeting. I don't want to make the motion to make the.
That is what my motion is that we move to advance it to the full business meeting.
Okay, I'll second that.
The chair, you have to call for.
Oh, all those in favor say aye. I guess if you put your hand up, I can see, because I don't think we're all going to be able to say aye.
Aye.
There we go. Thank you. So that moves. And then we're going to move on to these dates. So let me sit up here a little bit. Sorry, guys. So being that everything's going on, we are planning to plan ahead, move everything to this format, at least from now until the end of April, primarily because we don't know what's going to happen. And if things change in 4 weeks and we're getting to go back to being in public and meeting in person, certainly that will actually be easier for us to then move forward and plan. But as of right now, from now until April 30th, everything's going to be done in this format online. So the Budget Town hall type of conversation with our community that we were planning for March 25th. Being that the budget is now dropping March 24th, we are going to push that date back to April 2nd and update all of the communications across our social media, our website, and the community as a whole. There we go. She's putting up the date so everybody could keep up. So that is probably the biggest date that's going to be impacted. We are still going to have the first deliberations on April 16th, primarily because from the 24th through the 16th, that's still plenty of time for folks to review the budget. I think second biggest issue that came up with moving the budget release date to the 24th was allowing board members time to submit questions to the administration. That date was originally scheduled for, where's that at? Let me see, did we move that date? Hold on, you guys. I thought I wrote down that date because we moved it till Monday, March 30th. It was originally, I believe, the 27th. Yes, it was originally March 27th for the board as a whole to submit questions to administration. But we're going to move that date to the 30th to allow that weekend period. So we'll all get the budget on the 24th. You'll have the 25th until March 30th at 5 p.m. to submit questions for the first deliberations around, which won't happen till the 16th. And then the second deliberation is on April 30th. The questions will be due for the second round on April 10th. And then in between that, we're working with City Hall and City Council members to have that meeting scheduled at their request. And again, the chair, which is Malik Evans, has reached out to Marisol and had staff reached out so that we can start having conversations about the budget as well. So we're looking to set that meeting up, potentially a midday, a lunch hour in this same format, all online with them as well. So bear with us. We don't have a date yet, but I did want us to take the lead in submitting certain dates to them so that we can plan ahead. Let's see. Any other questions right now on that? No questions?
I do have a question.
Okay. I'm sorry, I can't see you, Commissioner Powell, because of the screen.
Oh, that's fine. So this document is very difficult to follow with the highlighted and crossed out, but it looks like April, I'm sorry. You have two dates for round one budget questions due. There's a March 30th date, and there's also an April 3rd date, questions due to Calia. And also, I only see one budget how many budget deliberation sessions do we have, and how many
Still have
public?
two.
We have two public hearings because I only count one.
So we actually have to still meet with administration about the public hearings, because in the past, the public hearings have then created a board memo, which the board then redirects based on community feedback to the superintendent, things to put back into the budget based on community feedback. And based on the conversations that we all had with the chancellor and the commissioner, I don't think we're in a position to do that this year. However, I'm going to reach out to Terry and his team to have a conversation with them. And I'm going to propose that we still allow for public hearings and comments. That also has to all be done online. So we're still trying to figure out how we're going to capture all of those things. And so we will communicate with this community more information about that. We will try to have that finalized by this week, but we did not have time between yesterday's communication and today to set this all up on what that was going to look like. So I do apologize that we did not have enough time as the staff and the team to meet to figure out what that's going to look like. But the board memo I'm going to suggest is a summary of concerns from the community, because based on all of our conversations yesterday, I don't think we're going to be in a position to take back feedback and then as a board issue things to put back into the budget. Because if we put things back into the budget, we're going to have to take things out. And that's also part of why I recommended board priorities up front to the superintendent so that he can have that from the very beginning. And, but I do think it's still going to be important to document the community's response to the budget and their concerns for public record. And I do think there's going to be impacts. There's no way around not having negative impacts to a $60 million deficit.
So let me be clear. My question about public hearings is, now I don't know if we have 2 public hearings simply because we always have, or whether that's required by law. And so because I'm only seeing one on the calendar, and I appreciate that the COVID-19, a lot of the rules that we've had to live by may be suspended, but can we pitch that question to legal and have them sort out what our obligation is for the public hearings?
Yes, can that go on the board? Well, I think they should look into it, but can it go on the board question log officially to potentially have a response before the end of the week?
That's fine with me. And as far as due dates for round 1 budget questions, round 2 budget questions, and so on, I hope that we'll get a cleaner document or a cleaner explanation over time as to when we're expected to respond, because this is pretty hard to follow.
Okay, we could do that. Commissioner Elliott?
This doesn't have anything to do with the schedule, but it just resonated with me. In light of the situation that we're in now with the virus, how does that impact our budget planning, and how does that impact our priorities?
Well, one of the questions earlier on in today's, we first started the board meeting, and I told Terry to give to the full board, is to really start thinking about the cost impact that this whole situation is going to have on the budget. I don't think because there's no end in sight right now, I don't know if we can have, even if it's 2 weeks at a time, a cost estimate of what the impact's going to be. I don't know if the state is going to release additional funding to support districts during this time. I know that there are lots of conversations being had. I know that state legislators' budget is also delayed a little bit. And so they're also trying to figure out some things. I don't know. I think there's just a lot of unknowns, unfortunately, but we can certainly ask Terry. And I don't know if he's still in this chat. Oh, there he is. I'm sorry, Terry. Everybody moved around on my screen. Ask Terry if at the end of week 2, we can get just a general analysis of what the cost impact's going to be.
Yeah, we can certainly do our best on what we're seeing when we don't have subs and the like. Like Commissioner LeBron said, this is unknown territory. I fear the possibility of going into next year and the governor coming back and saying we need to fill in funds as relates to economy and the like. So I can give as much information as possible, but it's going to be very, very uncertain times by way of predicting how much this is going to cost and impact our budget.
So are we preparing as we were previously? I mean, we're just preparing because we don't have any information at this time. So we're just going forward with what with pre-COVID-19 as we prepare the budget.
So we know our deficit at this point. We believe we'll have better indication of if we'll get any additional funds by next week. Other than that, that's all the information that we're going to be provided is the governor's finalized budget for 2021. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's conversations across the nation of impact on economy and if anything needs to be done there.
Okay, Commissioner, was that all, Commissioner Elliott?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Shepard?
So is the postponed release date for the draft budget, did you put that after you expect to hear something back from the state, or is it kind of still up in the air?
Yeah, it's still up in the air. We still don't know if it's, we anticipate next week, but we've had no indication they'll be before Tuesday. So right now it's still up in the air.
Okay.
So I will make a request now to have a finalized, clean version of all of the dates so that it's clearly written so folks can follow week to week when budget hearings will be, deliberations, due dates for board questions. So I do recognize looking at the format that was just posted, that was probably edited from our conversation earlier and then just thrown in here because we were going back and forth on dates and just trying to also figure out what a public hearing in this format and in this environment would look like and how to even capture information and post it. And so we're still working out those logistics. So unfortunately, there was a different vision for this budget year, how it was going to look, that we're going to have to just adapt based on the conditions and the state of the country right now.
Well, and one of the things that I'd like to jump in and say is that this document was developed so that you can see what was removed and what is included, so that you understand what we were planning on doing and are not able to do, and when things were originally established. We certainly can clean up the document, but it's important that you keep this document with you, and I'll make sure that you receive a copy of it so that you understand what the plans were prior to COVID-19 and where we are right now because of it. The other thing that I'll ask for patience with is the fluidity of documents and information, because everything is changing quite rapidly. All right.
Thank you. And that concludes my finance piece as the chair for today. So I'm going to turn the gavel back over to you, Ben. I'm muting myself.
All right, finance has been adjourned. That pretty much concludes our meeting. I want to indicate that, new business. There is a letter being circulated. I have to thank Mary Adams for helping me find it in my inbox. I must have missed it. She sent me a copy. There's a letter circulating around the community that basically asks for our officials in Albany to adequately fund urban education, specifically here in Rochester. And there has been a request to, individual people can sign that letter. I'm certainly going to, but there was been a request that maybe we consider signing off on that letter as an entire board. Carl has reminded me as of late that even that kind of conversation would require that we deliberate openly. You know, we can't take votes on certain parts of the letter. So real quick, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about today. Is everybody familiar with that letter? Just sort of nod or say yes. I think I've got no, Vice
Yes,
President.
you can hear me. You can't see me. I had to turn off the camera.
I see Vice President Elliott saying no, but everybody else I think has nodded yes. What I propose to do, since Vice President Elliott has not seen it, pretty generic letter, but specific in asking our legislators to seriously consider adequately funding Rochester. I'd like to put that on the agenda so that Vice President Elliott can have an opportunity to see it. I'll forward it to you, Vice President Elliott, so that you have it. And then we'll take that up on Tuesday to see if we can get the entire board to sign off on the letter, not just a letter from me because we have 4 or 5 votes, but maybe each and every one of us signing off on the letter. So we'll take that up on next Tuesday. I want to repeat again, for the first time that this has been done by the Board of Education or for any public deliberative body, I think this went really well. I know Marisol was a bit worried that we might mess up. But I think everybody did an exceptional job. And again, kudos to Marisol. I can't say this enough. Tom, Carlos, Kalia, and others who I'm probably missing, Carl, and everybody who put together the mechanics and substance of this meeting. If we could, we would just thank you with a standing ovation. The other thing that I wanted to mention is thank the Board of Education for supporting this. Again, I don't know of any deliberative body, at least in Monroe County, that has done this yet. We didn't waste any time. We realized that to continue to meet publicly really does put stress and possibly our staff in harm's way. And so we really do appreciate the Board of Education stepping up and doing this. If you have any comments, criticisms, or compliments regarding what happened today, of course, don't forward them to me, forward them to Marisol, and we'll try to improve this thing as we move this thing along. I think next Tuesday is going to be much more complicated. That's why I suggested that we try this on a light schedule, like agenda like we had today. But I think we'll get through it as we did today. Any other comments for the good of the Commissioner LeBron?
I actually do want to give kudos to the finance team. Not only did they change the format of that cover, but in the back of the resolutions in the past, I have asked them to stop putting some certain resolutions were all kind of one large paragraph with a bunch of numbers and companies. And that has been changed into an actual format that's easily readable. So I want to thank Tim and Paul for that as well on Bob's team. So thank you guys for that. You guys will notice it in the resolutions when you get to the.
Any other comments for the good of the order?
Yes, I didn't know when I was supposed to be able to take leave to do some personal things. I sent the special assistant a text, but she was, I think, focused on ensuring that this process went well. So I'm going to have to get off quick. And I'll see you all. The meeting is over, right?
Well, if you make the motion, that's a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Second.
Commissioner LeBron, all those in favor say aye by saying good night. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks again, everybody.
All right, any others?